How's it going, everyone? Yossa back here with another video. Hope you're having an amazing week so far. Today, I'm back with a really interesting video, something that I've been wanting to make for a very long time, and I feel like is going to give you guys a lot of value. So here we go. Today, we're going to talk about 10 tips on how to make your car last a little bit longer. And the reason why I wanted to do this is a lot of people that I know don't have any idea of how to take care of their car. And so I thought, you know what? Maybe there's a way I can help them out. Maybe there are a few little tips that I can share that will make a massive difference in people's lives and in the life of the car that they're going to keep, hopefully, for a long time. So here we go. When we talk about these top 10 tips, I wanted to just remind everyone I am not a mechanic. This is just purely from my experience and my knowledge working with cars over the years and from talking to mechanics and hearing their experiences as well. So take that with a grain of salt. And if you stay till the end of the video, I've got 2 more bonus tips for you at the end. So let's dive right in. The first tip I think is really important, and it's a pet peeve of mine because I see it happen so many times over and over and over again. And that is drive carefully over speed bumps and drive carefully over any ridge, pothole, anything like that. You may think, oh, well, Yosef, that's kind of obvious, but I can tell you over the years, I've seen so many people drive over speed bumps, flying over and scraping the bottom of their cars. So many people, they see speed bumps, they go right through them at full speed. So many times people go into driveways that have a little bit of a lip and they go in them super fast. And what you don't realize is not only is it damaging for your tires, it could be damaging for your rims, you could crack a rim, but it can also throw off your suspension, it can mess up your alignment, it can damage so many other things within the sort of wheel assembly and alignment assembly that probably worth thinking about and over time could really wear things out prematurely. So that's my first top tip. Just keep in mind that whenever you're driving and you see a bump in the road or you see some imperfection, something that you should be worried about, slow down a little bit. I don't care if the people behind you are impatient, they're honking their horn. Take your time because your car is more valuable than that 10 seconds that they're going to stop a little bit slower behind you going over those speed bumps. So keep that in mind. The next tip that I have for you is car washes. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, Yosef, I don't really care about the paint on my car. I don't really care how nice my car looks. It's a beater. It's just something that gets me from point A to point B. But hear me out for a second. If you take care of the paint of your car, not only is it going to help with the resale value, you're not going to have as many scratches on your car. It's not going to be as ugly and sort of worn out looking as maybe some other cars out there. But especially if you live in a cold climate area where you have winter and there's snow on the ground and there's lots of salt, it's going to prevent corrosion. When you clean your car and you've got all this gunk on your car, every time you wash it, it helps sort of rinse everything off and keep it nice and clean. And so not only is that going to help preserve all the mechanical parts, the metal parts, all on the underside of the car, but it's also going to help keep your paint look a little bit nicer. And when you have your paint looking a little bit nicer, it's going to make sure that, guess what, when it's time to sell or turn your car back into the dealer at the end of your lease, you're going to get the maximum value for it. And that's really important. So when you wash your car, if you're doing it by yourself and you're doing anything on the exterior of the car, make sure you're using a microfiber cloth. Really important. Anything else, it's going to scratch your paint. And even a microfiber cloth, if it's not perfectly clean, it can scratch your paint. So keep that in mind. And the same thing goes with car washes. So many people line up for those touch car washes. But if you think about it, those touch car washes, all the cloths and everything in there are touching thousands and thousands of cars. And what happens is they're going to accumulate all the dust and dirt and everything else from the cars before, and they're going to use that and just sort of rub against your car and potentially damage it. So if possible, always go to a touchless car wash. It's going to make a world of a difference for maintaining and preserving the paint on your car. Now, it may not do a perfect job cleaning everything, but if you really want a perfect job, do it on your own. You can never beat a little elbow grease, a bucket, some water, and some soap. So that's my second tip for you. The third tip kind of falls along the same lines. If you have a car that's sitting outside for a long time, chances are you've got bird poop on your car. It's something that's not preventable. And when you're driving along in the summer or when the weather is nice and you're going for a nice long drive, you tend to find that there's a lot of dead bugs on your car at the end of the trip. Now, those dead bugs may seem like not really important to you, but guess what? They leave a residue, and all their bodily fluids and everything else that sort of is decomposing on your car as you let it sit, it can eat away at the clear coat on your paint. And the same thing with the bird poop. So if you can, if at all possible, clean it as soon as you can and use the right materials for getting it clean. For bird poop and for any dead bugs on your car, they have really good solutions out there that you can buy that are designed specifically for taking that off and not for destroying your clear coat on your paint. So that's something that could really help. Again, we talked about preserving the paint and how important that is, but you also don't want all that stuff on there because you never know if it's on a metal surface, what that's going to do if it penetrates a little bit deeper. And it's always better just to clear that off so you've got a nice, shiny, clean car going forward. So keep that in mind when you go on a nice long road trip. Take a few microfiber cloths with you. Take that bug remover. If you don't have it, hand sanitizer or a little bit of alcohol and water does a really good job. But remember, when you do that, you have to put something on it to protect the paint afterwards. So if you do remove the bird poop with some hand sanitizer, make sure you've got a little bit of wax or something that you can put on that area that you've rubbed off. And that's just going to make sure that it preserves the paint even a little bit better as you go forward. Number 4, when you clean your car in the winter, don't use a brush. I can't say this enough. I have seen people do the most ridiculous things when you clean your car in the winter. And for those of you who live in a warm climate, well, you're just in luck, and I'm not talking to you. But if you are living in a winter place, just like I am here in Canada, make sure you have a rubber brush. Something that's not with bristles, because those bristles are going to damage your car so much. I've seen people clean their cars with shovels. I've seen people use scrapers to clean their car. That to me is like taking your nails and rubbing them on a chalkboard. That's just as bad. So make sure that if you are cleaning your car in the winter, use a brush that has a rubber piece, almost like one of those squeegees that you see in service stations that are designed to help you clean your windows when you come in for a fill up. Those are the types of things that are way better for your paint than using anything with bristles that are potentially going to damage and scratch it. All right, number 5. Now this is a really, really important one. People are always curious about what happens when you get in your car. Do you need to let it warm up? Can you just get in and drive it? So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. When you wake up in the morning, how many of you are ready as soon as you open your eyes to just get up and go? I know myself, and I know a lot of people that I know, need to take a little bit of time. You can't just get up and go boom, 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 and start getting into your daily activities. You need a second just to wake up, breathe a little bit, and get yourself in a normal sort of state of consciousness. And it's the same thing with your car. When you turn your car on in the morning, or for the first time after a long time, don't just put it in gear and floor it and go, because your car needs to warm up a little bit. And it doesn't need a whole lot of time, but it needs a second just to breathe, get all the fluids going, make sure the oil is circulating and all of that before you start gunning it, especially in the winter. In the winter, cars sit and they're cold and all the fluids are cold, and it takes time just for them to circulate and move and warm up a little bit. If you've got an engine block heater, if you live in a very, very cold place, that's going to help tremendously, but you still need to take a minute just to let your car warm up. So you're probably thinking, how long do I need to warm up my car? And that's a great question. You don't need to sit for 10, 20 minutes to let it warm up. I don't think that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, the engines also need air. And if the car's just sitting idle for so long, it's not getting the same amount of air that it should be when it's driving. And therefore, it's not going to warm up as quickly as possible as you would be if you were just to take the car on a drive. But when the car starts, you'll notice the little needle on the rev counter, it'll be a little bit higher than normal. And over a couple minutes while you're sitting and letting the car warm up, it'll start going back down to the normal idle speed. And usually that's around 1,000 RPM, 800 RPM, 1,100 RPM, depends on your car. But take a look at it and just pay attention to that, because once that needle drops back down to the normal resting place when the car is on and idling, that's how you know your car is ready to drive. And at that point, go ahead, go drive and not worry about it. Don't drive super hard right away. You still want to make sure that everything is warmed up and up to temperature. But at least that is sort of the basic warm-up period that you need your car to be in to be able to drive properly and not to have to worry about it. Number 6. Now this is an interesting one that a lot of people don't know about, and it took me time to figure it out as well. Every car that has a gas cap, there is always a little place for you to take that gas cap and rest it so that it doesn't have to rest on the paint. I know this isn't a big deal, but for me, it really is, because I hate it every time you take your gas cap off and it just dangles down there and it's windy outside. It's roaming around and potentially scratching your car. So take a look at your car and look to see, is there a little place for me to rest the gas cap on the filler sort of cap thing, the little door that opens up. And if you don't have a gas cap, then you don't have to worry about this. This is an easy one. But for me, I've always been interested in seeing the different cars and how they deal with it. Some of them have a little hole that you kind of stick it in. Some of them have a little resting place that you can slot it in. And I'll upload a picture over here so you can see what I'm talking about. But this is something that you can pay attention to and will save you a little bit of wear and tear on the area where you normally would let the gas cap rest. Number 7, this is a big one. Now, in driving school, a lot of times they tell you, make sure when you're steering your wheel, you're turning all the way and you're doing all that good stuff. But you don't want to be steering when the wheels aren't moving either forwards or backwards. Now, you can do it, it's not terrible, but if you do it a lot over time and you're just steering away while the car is not rolling, what ends up happening is that puts a lot of pressure on the steering rack. And over time, that could wear it out. It can wear out some of the fluids, it can wear out the tires, it can wear out things in a weird way when the car is not rolling. When the car is rolling, it's a little bit easier for the car to move the wheels, and when you're steering, it's putting a lot less pressure on it. Now, we don't really feel the pressure so much because we have power steering. So we've got little motors and things that help assist us when we're turning the steering wheel. But anybody who's over 50, 60 years old and is familiar with cars back in the day that have had no power steering, you know how difficult it is to turn that steering wheel when the car is not rolling. And so it's the same thing for us now. Even though we have the power steering, the motors that are in there and turning the steering wheel with us, that's putting a lot of pressure on them. And so it's always best, if possible, to start rolling a little bit when you turn the steering wheel in either direction. And that's going to help save a little bit of wear and tear on the steering rack and all the other components. All right, number 8. Now this is an interesting one. Anybody who drives a manual transmission or drives a truck would be very familiar with this, but people who drive an automatic probably are less familiar with this. And it's something that I think is really important. When you're going down a hill, and I'm not meaning just a little tiny hill that you go down and sort of carry on your way, but I'm talking about really, really steep, long hills. And if you've ever been in Europe, you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever driven in some places that have, really mountainous sort of areas and you're going down a long hill, this is something that you would probably encounter pretty frequently. When you go down these hills, instead of just resting your foot on the brake and slowly touching it and trying to slow the car down, shift down a gear. Almost every car now has the ability to go into some sort of manual mode where you can choose what gear you want to be in. And the reason why this is important is there's a concept called engine braking. Your engine, when it's in a lower gear, will actually slow down the car. It won't let you accelerate so much when the revs are up a little bit higher. So when you're going down a really long hill, instead of using your brakes and wearing them down very quickly, what will happen is if you engine brake, if you just shift down a gear or 2, maybe 3, depending on what gear you're in going down the hill, it'll really help keep the car at a normal pace. It'll actually slow it down so you can't go, out of control just rolling down the hill in that gear, and it'll save you from keeping your foot on the brake. And that's really helpful because if you're constantly putting your foot on the brake pedal, what's happening is those discs and the pads, they're constantly in contact and they are generating a lot of heat. And a lot of heat means they're going to wear things down a lot quicker. So you could go through your brakes prematurely, whereas if you engine braked, it will save the life of your brakes. And it's not going to damage your car in any way, as long as you're not hitting red line. So make sure you're somewhere a little bit below that, and it's going to make sure that your car is running effectively down the hill, and it's going to make sure that you aren't losing control as well. All right, number 9. Now this is a really important one. It probably is really obvious for most people, but don't skip out on oil changes. I know a lot of people forget about them, but oil changes are so important. Most cars today have some sort of turbocharging or supercharging or things like that go on. You don't have normally aspirated engines. And what that means when you have those turbochargers and superchargers is it's cramming a lot of extra power into the engine. And when you cram a lot of extra power, that means that you need really good oil. And when your oil is dirty and gunky and thick and it's not great, all the engine components are working a little bit harder and they're not moving efficiently. There's a lot of rubbing that's going on, and over time that can damage them, and you don't want to have to replace an engine because that's a very expensive thing. So I always tell people, don't just wait for the kilometers that they tell you to change them at. remember what the time intervals are for changing your oil for your car. If it's 6 months, if it's 8 months, a year, just know what that is. And if you don't drive a lot, don't say, oh, well, it tells me I can do 25,000 kilometers before I can change my oil. Don't wait for that if you only drive 10 a year, because your oil is going to be all gunky and not great over the course of that 10 or 12 months, as opposed to waiting for the kilometers to be driven. You can't change your oil too much, but you can damage the car by not changing it enough. So keep that in mind next time for your oil change. Make sure it's carved into your calendar and you know about it well in advance. Make sure you change your oil on time. I promise you that's going to make a massive difference on the longevity of your car. So you're probably thinking at this point, why do I care about all these tips? Well, if you're somebody that keeps the car for a very, very long time, then this is going to really help make sure that you don't have costly maintenance happening later on. Maybe you bought a used car that's a couple years old. You don't want to have to deal with some of those really big maintenance issues sooner rather than later if you can hold them off. And another thing is, if you're returning the car back to the dealer, maybe you're trading it in, maybe you've got it at the end of the lease, you want to make sure that you've got the maximum value for your car and that the dealer doesn't tell you, oh, go fix this and go fix that, for it to get the maximum value on the trade-in or when you're returning the lease. So keep that in mind, really, really important. Here's number 10, and that is take care of your car and it'll take care of you. I know that's a simple thing, but in everything that you do, don't just slam your doors. Again, don't just get in and drive right away in the morning. Let your car warm up, take care of the paint, take care of all the things inside the car and outside of the car. And the more of that that you do, the better off your car is going to be and the longer it's going to last you. So I promised you if you stayed this far in the video, I would give you 2 more bonus tips. This next one is one of my big pet peeves. You see, a lot of times people think they're really cool when they're driving, they're backing out of a driveway, and then they shift right into gear and they start going while the car is still rolling. That's a cool thing. But it's not for your car because it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the gearbox. Imagine you're rolling backwards and all of a sudden you're like, no, quickly change and roll forwards. That's putting a lot of pressure on the gearbox. Don't do that. Take a second, let the car come to a full stop, and then change back into drive. And it's the same thing if you're driving forward. Don't go into reverse while the car is still moving forward, because that same pressure is being exerted and it's really hard for the gears to mash back into place when you're shifting into that reverse or drive gear. Keep that in mind. I see it happen a lot of times. People are driving like 5 kilometers an hour and then they shift into reverse, or they shift into drive. It's horrible for your transmission and it's going to make a lot of issues later on if you keep that car for a long time. So be patient. It's going to save your gearbox. And the last tip that I have for you, the last bonus tip that I've got for you is when you park on a steep hill, use that parking brake. Use that emergency brake or whatever you want to call it, electric brake that you've got it now. Use it, because what happens when you're leaving your car on a steep hill, all the weight of the car is stuck on your parking gear. And that's putting a lot of pressure on that gear. And it may take a lot of time for it to wear out or cause any damage, but when you release the brake after you put it in park, all of a sudden now the car rolls forward a little bit and now it's harder to shift back into drive afterwards. So when you park, make sure you use that emergency brake. It's going to save that parking brake over time. So those are my top tips for taking care of your car. I know there are a lot of other really great things that you can do if you're a mechanic, but I'm not getting into that. This is for simple things that everybody can do just to maintain their cars and keep them staying a little bit nicer and better for the long haul. I hope this was helpful for you today. If it was, please share this video with other people that you think would get a lot of value from it. And I'm really excited to see you all in the next video. Have an amazing rest of the week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.